Where do we reinforce the aircraft? So take a look at this now famous World War II diagram of an airplane. And as you can see, all of the red dots represent bullet holes on airplanes that returned from combat missions. And early analysts decided that all of these red dots were the bullet holes. Well, that's where they would reinforce the plane. They'd put extra armor in these places because surely that's where all the bullet holes were found. And there was one voice that contradicted this opinion, and it was that of Abraham Wald, and he was a statistician. I think I've got that right. It's not a stutter. I'm hoping that's the way you say it. And he came up with the idea that, well, these were all the airplanes that made it home, and therefore they weren't taking into account all of the airplanes that didn't make it home, and where it would be sensible to put the reinforcements of armor. And that, of course, was now, as maybe you've already know, that is to reinforce the areas where the bullet holes were not found, as these, if hit by enemy fire, were the airplanes that didn't make it home. So it's a really good representation of survivorship bias. And that's what I want to talk about today. So if you're watching this and you like what I'm talking about, then please like and subscribe, because it will really help a little small, teeny weeny little channel like mine to grow a little bit and have a little bit more impact and reach more people just like you. Thanks. So what is survivorship bias? Well, it happens when we focus on the stories, the people, the things that are successful, and we ignore everything else that fails and disappears. And the result is that it leads to a warped opinion of what makes success, how it happens, and why it happens. Startup myths, the garage billionaire. So we all love the story of Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos starting something in their garage and then ending up billionaires. But what about all of the others who similarly dropped out of college, worked their asses off 16 hours a day, and then quietly folded and were unsuccessful and failed and then disappeared, never to be heard from again? Well, survivorship bias filters them out. So they never appear on our radar. We never hear of them. So it looks like the dropout to billionaire is a proven pipeline to success. Hustle culture is alive and well on social media, and you got to hand it to those coaches, those self-made coaches. So I believed in myself, I worked super hard, and now I make 100K a month teaching other people how to make 100K a month. What you don't see is all the other people who worked equally hard, believed in themselves just as much, and failed and fell flat on their faces. But again, they get filtered out because we never hear from them, because only the successful coaches post. And something close to my heart, the Instagram fitness transformations. So you've seen it before, the 12-week transformations, the amazing shredded physiques, the magic supplements, and you've got somebody giving a testimonial to the 12-week plan they just bulldoze through and have the success to show for it. But what it doesn't show is the thousands of people who tried the exact same plan, who fell off the wagon, didn't achieve the results, got injured, got burnt out, or just plain didn't make it. But the algorithm doesn't reward quitters, and it's only the success stories that go viral. So here's an example of survivorship bias that I really love, and that's the example of the Bulgarian weightlifting team. Now, this is quite a small country compared to the US or Russia that they were competing against in the early 80s. And they were winning all the medals, they were clearing up. And obviously they were doing something different, and their success was attributed to the coach, Ivan Abadiev. And he was very systematic in how he trained his athletes, and he had them training 2 to 3 times a day. They were going after max effort lifts, so maximum lifts each and every lifting session would involve max attempts. And this was completely at odds with what they were doing in the US or the USSR at the time. And it was basically lift, eat, rest, repeat, and very little in the way of deloads.
Our program is we start with squat in the morning, after snatch, and then clean and jerk, and then squat. We finish. It's about 1:30, and then 4:30 we start again with the snatch, clean and jerk, squat. Another 2 hours left, and then in the evening one exercise, snatch or clean and jerk, and then squat. This is our program every day.
Yeah. What'd you do in between the training sessions?
Sleep and eat, relaxing.
But what we hear about is all of the success stories, all of the people, all of the athletes who made it onto the podium. And what it doesn't take into account is that this was a brutal regime, and it burnt out, spat up, or chewed up and spat out as many people as it helped. It was like a gigantic funnel into a meat grinder, and only the toughest, most resilient, most robust genetic super freak specimens came out the other end, having survived the training and thrived from the training, but most fell by the wayside and would, it was enough training and volume and effort and intensity to kill a horse. And many didn't survive that brutal regime, but the ones that did, they're the ones that get all of the attention. They're the ones that end up on the podiums with all of the medals. And it has to be attributed to something. And so it's reverse engineered. And obviously it's the training style, and it's, Ivan Abadiev who is responsible for this success. Now, I don't think too many countries or weightlifting clubs or countries are using this style of training now. It's too brutal, and the only thing that could perhaps help it survive was the state-sponsored level of doping that was involved, as it was in many countries. I'm not saying that's the only thing that would have made them successful, but yeah, it's something to have a look at. In the CrossFit world, few people haven't heard of Matt Fraser, 5-time winner of the CrossFit Games, an absolute beast and a genetic marvel. But so what's survivorship bias got to do with him? Well, he has famously got a training brand, HWPO, hard work pays off. And his work ethic is legendary, training 6 to 8 hours a day, much like many of the other CrossFit athletes who are at the top of their game. However, it fails maybe to take into account everything to do with his story. And famously, he didn't have to look after anything to do with his personal life, paying bills, cooking his food, organizing his travel. All of that was taken care for by either his business manager or his wife. So the only thing he had to do was focus on training. Now, obviously, I know this isn't a unique story, but when it comes to him retiring from the sport and then beginning to focus more on his coaching and getting a stable of highly competent, competitive, genetically gifted athletes, he hasn't had the same success. And one of the most notable proteges was Mal O'Brien, who was very young, very gifted, and very successful, who came to his stable and trained under his tutelage. And unfortunately, the training just did not work for her. Yeah, she's since left his coaching stable and hasn't reached the success that she had previously and previous to working with him. So I suppose this means that basically not everything is taken into account in knowing his full story, his genetic gifts, how gifted he was, and with his background in Olympic lifting and the advantages that gave him, and also how he responded to his style of training that he successfully implemented for himself, but that may not necessarily work for everybody else. So why does any of this even matter? Well, survivorship bias warps our expectations, and it leads us to believe that success is commonplace and easy to replicate. It makes us misjudge risk, and it also is going to increase the likelihood that we waste our time following strategies that really only work for the few. The most important data is often the parts that you can't see, the failures, the missing voices, the planes that never made it home. So if you're only studying the survivors, you're reinforcing the wrong parts of the system. So what can you do instead? And I suppose that comes down to asking a few fundamental questions. Look for the patterns behind the failures. What didn't work and why? And you can ask, who burned out trying this? What hidden advantages did the winners have? What did the dropouts, the injured, the exhausted all have in common? That's how you build a strategy that avoids predictable failure instead of copying rare success. Winners can inspire you, but it's the losers who can teach you all about where the risks are.